with all that stuff out of the way, Luke, are you ready to give us an overview of the Tableau conference?
Oh, I'm presenting today?
Yep.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, you're funny. You're super funny.
Awesome. Yeah. Let me fire up the screen share.
Although that would have been par for the course for today.
I just wanted to see your reaction. All right. So I've been tasked with attempting to put together a cohesive reflections and highlights from the Tableau conference. It took place earlier in November, another virtual conference. Over the next like 15, 20 minutes, I'm just going to do my best to summarize a lot of my key takeaways and points. But as people who attended know, there's like a ton of different avenues you could take to attending this conference. So I left time at the end for us just to have an open discussion on anything else that I might have missed along the way. As far as just general housekeeping, you can feel free to use the Zoom chat as I'm going along. I'm just going to be kind of spouting my experiences, my thoughts as we move, and I'm sure there's some rich discussions in there. And like I said, we can have an open discussion at the end. But yeah, feel free to chat. Pretty open style of presenting here. All right, so for the Tableau conference this year, it was on November 9th through 12th. It was our second year of doing a completely virtual conference, which is sad for those of us who have attended Tableau conference in person in the past. It's a really fun experience when you get to see other familiar faces in person, at least for once a year. One thing I noticed about this year over last, I just felt like there was just a general, like, I think we're starting to figure out this whole like virtual conference thing a little bit better. It felt very like on point with its general setup. Had some cool Slack channels for you to join to be able to kind of at least interact with people, even if it was a remote environment. They had some really fun data music videos just to keep things light in between all of the various sessions. What I really particularly loved about this style of virtual is that like all of this content is instantly available. So if you missed the conference completely or missed a few sessions, all of that content is available on Tableau's YouTube playlist. And so it's really great that that content is just instantly out there, free to consume, lots of really great content. And we'll talk about sessions at the end if you want to make suggestions on what should people be watching. A lot of people attended, and something that I don't take as much advantage of, but I've heard really great experiences from it. And even during our sessions talk at the end, if people have additional experiences they want to add on, is brain dates, which is really this kind of concept of having 4 potential strangers get together and talk about a very pointed concept within Tableau or data in general. Just kind of a fun way to virtually meet some new people and get some of that like serendipity of the like in-person conference back into a virtual world. All right, so then for a rough agenda today, I'm going to start by just going over probably like what I think is the crown jewel of the Tableau conference. Something I've always enjoyed is Iron Viz. There's a lot of really interesting takeaways that I personally took and wrote up in a LinkedIn post if you want to check it out around just Tableau's general product roadmap and reflections about where they're looking to go. And then lastly, I leaned into a lot of my colleagues that I work with who attended to a lot more sessions than I did to make some recommendations on what their favorite sessions were, and that's where we can have an open discussion. So Iron Viz, for those who just don't know of the format, is essentially you got 3 people who have won a feeder competition to basically be able to compete on a virtual stage and build a dashboard within a very short time limit. So these dashboards that you're seeing below are dashboards that were built from scratch at the beginning of this like essentially 15-minute session. And over the course of this session, they were just given data and they had to kind of provide a lot of their own design, analysis, and storytelling on top of all of this. What was really great about this year was, first of all, the champion was really cool. Lisa ended up winning, and it's the first Iron Viz champion that's a woman, which is really exciting. But also it's kind of cool from a relatively new user. I don't know like Lisa's direct experience, but I kind of picked up that she was relatively new to the Tableau scene. And I thought that was a really cool, I don't know, just way to talk about like, it doesn't take years of experience to get really good at this tool. And Lisa did a phenomenal job with her presentation. Speaking of the presentation in general, like these dashboards are graded across kind of design, analysis, and storytelling. And I had a chance to go back and like look at the judges' score across all 3 of those. And I'm gonna forget the guy on the left is that Pradeep. He scored really high on the design side of it, and as you can tell, like I think out of all the dashboards, like his is a very like clean, crisp business dashboard that we all kind of like know and love and aspire to in a lot of our like own kind of business environments. But I think what really stood out with the other two contestants, and in particular with Lisa, is the general storytelling and analysis around it. Lisa in particular did a phenomenal job with being able to kind of use the animations within Tableau and to be able to share a story through this data. And so I highly encourage you to like watch this session live, because it's just a really cool experience to not only see how this dashboard comes to life, but then also witness a very like just expert data analyst be able to work through a data-driven story. And I think in large part, that was the reason why she took crowd favorite and did the highest on from a storytelling perspective. I'll pause there to see if anyone else has any like quick thoughts on Iron Viz.
Yeah, it was really amazing. And you're right. I think 2 out of the 3 competitors had been using Tableau for less than a year. Mm-hmm. So it was amazing. And it kind of makes me feel like garbage a little bit, but they they were awesome.
Yeah, my reflection on this was that the last few years, like to me anyway, there seems to have been one clear winner in storytelling, one clear winner in analysis, and another clear winner in design. And so I always had a hard time choosing like, okay, well, combining those 3 elements, which one would have been my favorite? And yeah, this year, just all of these are amazing. If you haven't had a chance to like really check into them and check the interactivity, and yeah, highly recommend spending some time with them.
Yeah, it's one of my recommended sessions. If you did miss it, it's a really fun time, especially in person whenever we get back to that world. All right, so next up, I'm just gonna high level talk through like what is the future of Tableau. A lot of this is just like my personal perspective of like the themes I was picking up during a lot of the keynote presentation, as well as the devs on stage. After I get through this section, I would love just to, even in the chat window, you can feel free to like agree or disagree with my perspective of this, but I thought it was kind of cool to see where Tableau was going, and they covered over a lot of different features that are in various stages of development. They get me excited about where the Tableau product is going overall. I believe this was the first time that Tableau kind of unveiled this new visual of like how they're thinking about their kind of cohesive strategy. So a lot of it is just around like how people are accessing data, how people are collaborating with data, and we'll talk a lot about that. They're really making a stronger push within the enterprise space around how do you do trusted data at scale. And then I'll have a slide completely dedicated to their perspective on business science and all the cool things that they're doing within that. So there's a lot to like digest in this, and I try to do my best to like narrow this down to like some key concepts or my thoughts around what Tableau and Salesforce together are really thinking about going. So first things first, it would be hard not to talk about Tableau without talking about just the heavy Salesforce influence that continues to permeate through Tableau's roadmap. So August 2019 was when Salesforce officially acquired Tableau. And it's amazing that it's like, over 2 years since that's happened. It's like really flown by, maybe because of the global pandemic. But you can definitely see that like the influence of that Salesforce acquisition is definitely showing up in a lot of like how Tableau is thinking about its next investments and its integrations. So if you didn't already know, like Salesforce also acquired Slack. And a heavy part of Tableau's keynote was really talking about how Slack, Salesforce, and Tableau are really going to kind of come together as this like new workforce, like where people do work. And in particular with Tableau, there is a continued theme of like every single integration has something to do with how people are going to be accessing those insights through Slack, through that kind of collaborative chat that Slack brings to it. So I'm really excited because even in this next upcoming version, there is a lot of continued Slack integrations where these end users no longer have to go out to a platform to access dashboards, but rather they can ask questions of their data and do visual analysis pretty much directly within Slack. Also within the Salesforce ecosystem, there's a continued presence of what used to be Einstein Analytics. Now it's kind of called Einstein Discovery / TCRM or Tableau CRM. There's a lot of like, branding and moving around within there, but Tableau CRM is really Salesforce's integration of Tableau type visualizations, and also where Salesforce has predictive capabilities to basically do predictive analytics on your Salesforce data within Salesforce. And so there's if you happen to be part of an organization that has Salesforce and Tableau, Tableau CRM is probably part of some discussion somewhere about how can we integrate more predictive analytics into our organization. And then lastly, I think this was like a subtle one that I was really picking up on is there's like a lot of talk about Tableau Online, and surprise, surprise, like the world's largest software as a service company is really starting to push Tableau's software as a service or platform as a service offering. Everything about, like, they were talking about pushing new features, and what features were becoming available was like, oh, Tableau Online will definitely have this, and it'll also be available for Tableau Server. And I thought that was kind of just an interesting theme that I kept hearing throughout the whole keynote. Next up, the Tableau Exchange. So for a while there, we've really always had this concept of dashboard extensions where developers had the ability to kind of build applications within Tableau Desktop and have Tableau Desktop be able to speak with external applications. And Tableau Exchange really just kind of like brings this into a full platform where not only do we have the ability to like put applications within Tableau Desktop, but now we have this idea of accelerators. So earlier this year, Tableau acquired a company called Linpack out of Europe. And so there's actually a lot of like pre-made templates that company did that are now available, or at least will be soon available within the Exchange. They're known as accelerators. And so if your organization is really looking to get a jump start on a really fairly well-designed dashboard, and you don't have to like do that much to get started, I'd highly encourage checking out Tableau Exchange and checking out accelerators, because there's a good chance there's something in your industry or your subject matter expertise that might help you get started. And then taking that a step further, Tableau in general just had a very strong theme of like a continued investment as a developer platform. And Tableau has historically been kind of like this black box tool. It did everything. It wrote the SQL for you. You could build cool visualizations, and it was really hard to like move outside of that. And this like really felt like a turning of the page for Tableau when we started talking about viz extensions, which is a really exciting way for all of us in the community to be able to start really building those like custom chart types that we always see on Tableau Public, where somebody has to write up a blog post about like how they had to model the data and all their like little template spreadsheets. And now viz extensions are really just providing that click and drag interface within Tableau that you can basically build cool Sankey diagrams directly within Tableau through a click and drag interface. So that's pretty exciting and kind of a whole new realm for Tableau to start to move in, but it could be a really powerful one as they get more interactive vizzes available for the everyday users. There's also prep extensions, so being able to develop custom connections for external applications. So you can have a Tableau prep flow that's basically designed to bring in your Google Analytics data in a certain way, or your NetSuite data in a certain way. And so again, like there's this whole developer community that can really start building out products behind the scenes that make it easier for an everyday user to connect to the data that they need and just get started, which is a really great way to get new users using Tableau. And then lastly, custom data sets. So just having kind of like the app store of data out there, you can use trusted third-party data in your analysis, and Tableau would just make that available for you just to connect to data, and you don't have to go out into some like government website or some third-party repository to try to find like key data that is just, should be publicly available, or at least available from a centralized source. All right, so now we get into Tableau's investment around business science, which for me just is a lot of like marketing language around them trying to get more into the predictive realm, the data science realm of analytics. I talked already about just Tableau CRM and Einstein Discovery. All of that functionality is available today, and it continues to mature with every release. It's really how Tableau and Salesforce are really starting to integrate closer together. Next up is Ask Data as a functionality where people have the ability to ask really like English sentences of their data. So like, what was sales yesterday? And then Tableau would in turn spit out a really nice visualization that would build a graph about what were sales yesterday, or what was the trend of sales yesterday. And so their kind of whole play there is to really go after the everyday business user that doesn't really want to get into the click and drag interface of Tableau, or and more just ask really those like English-based questions. This could be really powerful. I've seen it lightly used in a lot of the organizations that I've been consulting with. But when I think about that coupled with like the Slack integration, that gets like dangerously close to a business user that like Ask Data could really start to see some pretty good mileage. I think it was always tough to tell a business user to log into a platform to ask a question and hope it worked. But Ask Data, like being in front of you in Slack, might be a really compelling use case for a lot of organizations looking to increase adoption. Explain Data has always been this like machine learning concept behind the scenes of Tableau, where we as like Tableau developers have the ability when we're designing a dashboard to click on a data point and say explain data to really understand like why does an outlier exist, or why is this trend spiking in a certain way. And Tableau continues to like take this explain data concept and really start to push it into more of like, if I want to explain what's going on in a dashboard, or for Tableau to tell me like what is an outlier I should be worried about or looking at. They're really trying to put explain data now, not only in front of like Tableau developers behind the scenes, but explain data also just for everyday users looking at dashboards. So this kind of like frontline machine learning isn't by any means new to the analytics industry. It'll be interesting to see how this evolves, just because I think it can have a potential huge upside, but there's also just the risk of like machine learning can kind of get you only so far if you don't understand good business context. So if there are outliers or spikes that could be explained by something, a business decision that was made, that might not necessarily show up in the data. And so it's kind of TBD on what explain data is really going to become long-term. And the last two that we just got kind of brief snippets of information on, and I snagged them from the YouTube video. Pretty excited about this, but frankly, like they didn't offer too much of a timeline. So we'll see when we're going to get this. Tableau really started talking about building a model builder. So a way for, again, an everyday business user to connect to data, choose what they're trying to go after as far as a target variable, and then essentially try like training models through a more GUI or guided interface. So it looks pretty cool right now. I think this one was further along than like the other one that I'm showing next, but really powerful capabilities coming out that way. And then next is scenario planning, which again, really powerful capabilities. It's really cool to think that you could actually use Tableau to do a guided visual analysis on like, what are different routes that my company could take to achieve a certain outcome, and what impact does that do on my data? That's going to be really powerful. Again, a lot of people in the space, competitors are trying to do this as well. So I'm really curious to see as this gets more of a timeline and functionality for us to get our hands on. Yeah, not much to go off of right now other than some really cool, slick keynote demos. Final few ones of my take on the product roadmap. Performance checks was one that I was really fascinated by. I personally do a lot of work with like optimizing Tableau dashboards. And so Tableau started demoing this concept that all of us developers can now have this performance check directly within Tableau, where before we publish a dashboard, we can get kind of all those common recommendations on what are things that we may have done as developers that could be a potentially poor practice that is slowing down my dashboard. And so this is one of the screenshots that they had for this. I think this is actually coming out fairly soon, which is really exciting. If you are interested like me in like kind of jamming out further on like general performance tuning and how do I squeeze out every second of performance, a little selfish plug is next Wednesday, I am hosting a Need for Speed webinar on how to optimize dashboard performance. So feel free to check that out if you're interested. And shameless plug. And then lastly, just around their kind of general trust and data governance. So Tableau continues to invest like crazy into Tableau Prep and their data catalog. And so organizations that have so far taken the advantage of buying the data management add-on, they have access to a really powerful data catalog that helps everyday users just understand where's the data in this visualization come from, what database, how, what field is being used, and then also downstream impacts of like what other dashboards are using this field. And so there's a lot I can cover off on here, but like there's a lot of big changes coming in here where for me, it felt like the Tableau catalog is kind of like a non-negotiable now. There's a lot of really cool ways that you can see how data is changing. You can have kind of conversations with like the data lineage. I love that Tableau is actually kind of opening up their catalog a little bit more, so that if you kind of are bringing your own third-party catalog like an Elation or Calibra, Tableau catalog will actually start to like play with that nicely, so you don't have to maintain two different catalogs, because who wants to do that? So a lot of stuff like that is going to make both Tableau Prep and Catalog just really powerful, and really kind of shows that investment on like, how do we get trust in our data and general governance within a Tableau world? And the last one I want to like really just maybe quickly touch on is managed virtual connections are going to be really cool. They're coming out also in this upcoming release as well. If you're somebody who's like in charge of your organization of setting up data source connections, where you have to be really careful about what data is being connected with what and who can see what, virtual connections are going to basically create that like abstracted layer for you to set up a lot of like security policies to make sure only people can see certain data. And so everyone can kind of use the same data connection, but this managed virtual connection kind of helps abstract that a little bit more away to make it a little bit more safer and manageable for our IT friends to be able to have a little bit more control over what has historically been really tough. And then with that, I want to kind of just start to open up the floor a little bit more around favorite sessions. I did, I guess, ask the audience on from our team internally about what are some cool sessions that they checked out. I wanted to make sure that I got them out there as well. I won't claim to have watched all of these. And so with that, I'll hand it out to the general audience to tell me which ones on here resonate with you or which ones are we missing.
The only one that I can think of, that a number of these are really, really good, but there was one that Cesar Pico did where he was presenting alongside somebody else about Tableau Blueprint and how in a realistic way to implement that framework, that methodology at organizations of several different sizes. So I would recommend that one. And other than that, the Find Your Voice by Priya was a particularly really, really good one.
Yeah, it's a good call out. I heard the same thing about Priya's presentation.
Yeah, and maybe just quick to note, if you registered for the conference beforehand, obviously these are all available. If you didn't register for the conference beforehand, you can still get access to all of the content that was presented. You just obviously have to give them your email if they don't already have it. Easy trade. Mm-hmm. I have one quick question before I forget, Luke, around the Tableau catalog piece. Is that part of, like, how do they license that? Is that just part of the role-based subscriptions that they have now?
I believe last time I checked, and somebody can keep me honest, but I believe it's still part of the data management add-on that has a per user cost. So the data management add-on, last I checked, has both data catalog and prep conductor, which allows you, if you are a Tableau prep user, to have a kind of like an automated way to run your prep flows. But I've also seen a lot of language recently about how that might be changing. So I don't know any specifics around it, but it could change. And at this point, for me, honestly, I feel like catalog is just it's so good that it's like, if you don't have it, you're really missing out. Yeah. And I'm not even a Tableau salesperson.
I have a question, which is probably a stupid one, but I'll ask it anyway.
There's no stupid ones here.
About Einstein and the predictive stuff that they're trying to integrate and make available. So we use Salesforce, but that's internally, and what we use Tableau for is for client reporting. So totally different data sets. But what I am not clear on, because we're behind on our upgrades, and I cross my fingers every day that that's happening very soon. I don't know that I understand how you get access to Einstein Discovery and the Einstein functionality that they keep talking about. Do you have to license that separately? Is it part of your Salesforce licensing? Is it part of Tableau? That's very confusing to me still.
Yes.
Okay.
Are they still calling it Einstein? I thought they were.
There's
Is that
still Einstein Discovery is what the last I checked is what they're calling when you're using it within Tableau.
Okay, but if it's inside Salesforce,
It's just called Tableau CRM. And so
Yeah.
Tableau CRM is for use cases where in general you have a lot of your data, or at least most of your data, sitting in Salesforce, because then it can do predictive analytics like next recommended best action, or other things on top of your Salesforce data. And to answer your question, I do believe that they are licensed differently.
That was my guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they are licensed differently, where in Salesforce you need the right level of license in order to get the Einstein predictions, and then you integrate those as like a Tableau extension through the normal way you do extensions in Tableau Desktop.
Because that will be another challenge for us, is the word extension gives me Tourette's about, oh, they're never, out the firewall, back inside. They're not going to like that.
Totally.
So
yeah. There are some
that makes me sad
extensions-
a little bit.
Yeah, there are different classes of extensions, where there's some where they're sandboxed, which they have been vetted by Tableau. They're not communicating externally, and it just adds as like an additional plugin to Tableau Desktop. If you look at the extensions gallery, you'll see some that say sandbox. Those I feel are more easily trusted. The other ones, I've seen companies have to go through like a vetting process and a security process in order to feel comfortable adding those on. You're right.
Yeah, and just the fact that you might have to go through that tells me I'm not willing to try to go through that.
Yep, depends on your level of risk taking.
Yes, we don't like that word.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great question.
Any other favorite sessions?
If you're looking for a nice, like, short and sweet one, I really liked Make It Better by the I can't even say their names, Ken and Kevin F.
Flurlage.
Yes. It was a fairly manageable session to sit down and actually learn quite a few takeaways to level up your dashboard building game.
And this was the best devs on stage I've seen in a long, long time. Like, I wish we had been in person with a huge group for this, because there would have been a lot of people on their feet several times.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah.
The boomsticks.
I did point out to Tableau a while ago that from a branding standpoint, Tableau Business Science is always going to be Tableau BS to me. But I stuck with it. I did my best to.
Yeah, nice try. Yeah, and that's kind of one thing I forgot to mention too, is I thought it was interesting, especially over these last 2 years in particular, but this one really felt like a new age for Tableau, because usually when we're doing devs on stage, it's like all about these awesome new dashboard building Tableau desktop features. And that was such a small part of, if you go watch the devs on stage, it's really about how else can you get Tableau into a different application, and how else can you collaborate with Tableau outside of Tableau. So it feels like a very interesting time when they're really starting to ramp up what happens outside of Tableau, and less about how you're building visualizations.
Awesome. Well, I'll be honest and admit that I didn't watch much this year, partly because I was busy, and also probably partly in a quiet rebellion that it wasn't in person.
Yeah.
I did watch the Iron Viz and snippets of this and that, but
Yeah.
I will go back and rewatch some of these. So I appreciate the recommendations.
For sure. Big shout out to Brad Warner and Jeff Plattner for a fantastic list.
Thanks, guys.
It was all Jeff. I can't take any credit.
I take back my credit towards you.
Thank you.
Is Jeff on? Mr. Plattner?
I don't think so.
No, I don't see him. All right.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. Much appreciate you taking the time doing that.
Oh, this is fun. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I'm always happy to chat roadmap stuff. It's cool.
All right. Well, so I was texting Kelly from Salesforce. She's the gal who normally helps coordinate these things with us. And she asked me if we would do a screenshot and, you know, have everybody that is willing to pop their cameras on for a hot minute and let me take a screenshot, because she wants to feature our user group in like the weekly highlighted user group. So if you guys want to just, we've got 49 people on here. Let's just fill the screen with your lovely, lovely faces. And how do I get rid of this stupid thing on the right-hand side? Oh, here we go. I think I figured it out.
I would say have everybody unmute too, so the little red microphone goes away.
Oh, that's
Good call.
it's a dangerous prospect, but yes.
Only for people holding animals.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Okay.
kitty.
There we go. I got full screen mode. Okay. Now let's see if I can not screw up a screenshot, excuse me. Okay, ready everybody? Here we go. Okay, I think I got it. I better go like paste this into
Gosh, Vince, you've done this before too.
something. Did you say I've done this before?
Vince
Oh.
is like on point.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, shoot, you guys, nothing pasted. We might need to do it again. I'm gonna do the actual screen, like the little screen grabber. So, okay, hang tight. The snipping tool. All right. One more time.
Incest roar.
Okay, here we go. Got it. All right. Thank you, thank you.
Thanks for giving us the warning so that we're not like halfway and eating spaghetti or something like that. Oh, it usually works out.
That's right. I probably got some of those also in there. I took a couple just to make sure. Okay. All right, guys. So let me see if there's anyone waiting to get in. We're good there. Okay, so I have this this session, the Tableau speed tips, locked and loaded. So let me make sure that I am going to share this with my computer sound. So you guys can hear that. Okay. All right. Can you guys see it? Okay, so cool. This is, I haven't watched this whole thing. I did watch some of it, but these three women are just some of my favorite people in the Tableau community. They're absolutely amazing. So if you don't know who they are, check them out. Follow them on whatever, you know, LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever. So they did an amazing session here. So I will be quiet and we'll just let it roll. If for some reason you guys can't hear the sound, please start yelling at me so I can fix it.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Tableau Speed Tips, where we're going to share tricks for all skill levels. I'm Ann Jackson, Managing Director of Jackson 2, and I'm joined by my two colleagues.
Lana Brown, Analytics Consultant at the Information Lab UK.
And Heidi Kalbe, Senior Consultant at Woodmark Consulting.
We're here to share our favorite tips. Heidi is a new contender this year. You'll remember this session from years past. This is a highly regarded community session. Throughout this session, we're going to give you 5 of our favorite tips each, and then 2 bonus tips from each of us at the very end. Before we get started, I want to say there's no need to take notes. And because we're virtual and this session is fast, please do feel free to slow down the recording to enjoy the tips at your leisure. At the end of the session, there will be a survey for you to fill out. And in the meantime, you can connect with the community live on Slack. And with that, we'll get started.
All right, so the first one is really heavy topic. So we're talking about the order of operations. Sometimes you might have a table calculation and that will get lost as soon as you filter on a dimension. So for example, looking at the winners of the Eurovision Song Contest 2011, we have Sweden in 3rd place. So, but if we filter on Scandinavia, suddenly Sweden is in 1st place. Why is that? Well, reason is the order of operations. So if we have a dimension filter, that gets applied first, and afterwards a table calculation gets calculated. So if we want to keep the results of the table calc, we have to use a table calc filter. So let's do that. We need a really quick calculation, and this is going to be lookup. Let's call this region filter and let's use lookup. So this basically just looks up a different field at a certain offset. We want the one from the same row, so we use 0, and let's move this to filter and just keep Scandinavia, and we can see Sweden remains in 3rd place. Next one. Sometimes you might want to zoom in on a line chart, or you want to give your users the option to zoom in, and we can do that using a parameter. So let's call this one zoom axis with a question mark, so people actually know they can do something in here. Let's make this a Boolean, and when true, we want to zoom, and otherwise, no, we want to show this in full. So let's actually show this parameter, and let's make this a single value list, and now we need a calculation. So we are going to call this 0 line, because that's what we're going to do. If our zoom axis is true, then we want null in here, else 0, end, and that is it. And now we can just simply pop this on detail, add this as a reference line. You can see already I made this really, really wide and bright, so we can see that it's not in here because we're currently on true. If we switch to no show in full, we can see this is where our 0 line is. What we're going to do now is we edit our axis to not include 0, leave it on automatic, and we can see nothing changes because Tableau keeps this 0 line. But if we do say yes zoom, the 0 line vanishes and we can zoom in. All you need to do now is make this line invisible. That's it. Third one, we want to format our numbers. So you can see I have the difference on the right hand side, and I want to make it really, really obvious what's going on here. So first thing, that's not what I wanted to do. First thing that we're going to do is we want to format this. So in here, we switch to custom, and I can add a plus in front here, just to make sure that this is different. But we can go even one step further by adding a small triangle, and we can use UTF-8 sites for that. So just Google or use any search engine of your choice, UTF-8 triangles, and then we copy them from here. So simply copy this one, let's copy this, and let's copy the downward triangle as well. Go back here, and in we put the upward triangle and a downward triangle for the 0 values. And now you can see downward triangle for the negative values, upward triangle for the positive values, but we have positive plus 0, which is not the case. So we maybe want to have a plus minus sign in here. And we can do that by simply Googling that and again copying, because what we have in here is first positive, then negative, and by adding another semicolon, we have the 0 values in the back. So we can do that. Or we could even replace that with text. So what we can do is we can show more or less or same in here. We don't even need a calculation. This is all just formatting. So sometimes you might want to add sheets to your dashboards as you want to do. But as soon as we add anything in here, Tableau creates this automatic container that just messes up our dashboard. So what can we do? We simply move this to floating and move it outside our dashboard. So simply drag it over there so it's not in anyone's way. And now if we add any other sheets, all the other items get added to that floating container. What can we do now? We can simply use this container when we are ready, when we have everything added to the sheet, and add it wherever we want. So of course, I don't want them on top of one another. So one bonus trick, we can actually move in a horizontal container, drop this vertical container in there. And if we remove that, everything gets situated like next to each other. And last one, you may want to toggle between light and dark mode, and we can do that. You can see I have my dashboard in here, and I have a floating empty container that is just black. And we have this show hide button, so we can hide it and we can show it again. Let's move this show hide button into the dashboard, and let's make this whole thing floating as well. So what we can do now is we use this background item and we move it to the position 0 and 0. We make it exactly as big as the dashboard. We can see it fills the whole background, and we do the same for our actual dashboard content. So again, move this to 0, 0, and give it the same size as the dashboard. And now we have a dark mode, and we can switch to light mode in a second. And those were my 5 tips. So beat that, Lorna.
Okay, so my first one is all about relationships and how to make them work with targets data. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my data.
I'm just going to pause it for 1 second. just quick check in with everybody. Did you get all that? Right? Like 100% comprehend, you got everything, right? It was easy. It was like, do you guys think that was sped up, like the audio? I chatted that. I wonder if they like ever so slightly sped up the audio, because it is incredibly fast.
I was waiting for the first speaker to speak again to compare, and I do think it was sped up just a little bit. At first I didn't, but yeah.
Yeah, maybe like, yeah, exactly, Mike, like a 1.25% or something. Because it's like, I feel like I'm a fast talker, but holy smokes.
It's tough with Ann Jackson because she naturally talks super fast anyway. So it's kind of hard to tell with her, but yeah, I'm pretty sure it's sped up.
All right, well, let's keep going here. Let's see what Heidi has to share with us, and we'll check back in.
Order Superstore, we all know and love. We know that it's at row level with products, and it also has the individual order dates. Our targets data, on the other hand, is at monthly level. So what I can do with this is when I bring it in, we have this relationship option in here. Tableau will automatically pick up the linked by subcategory. What we also want to do is create a date calculation. So I'm going to use date and then followed by the date trunk of the month of order date. And what this does is it rolls that individual date up to the month of the order date, which I can then align that to my month value. And what happens with that is now when I go into my first worksheet, previously, when I had to use data that was at different levels of detail, I would have had to have created an LOD or use blends. And so I'm going to just drag and drop my target on the top, right click, and obviously synchronize. I'm going to change my secondary axis to a Gantt bar. And now what we can see here is we have our, let me just change these colors. So we have our sales in gray and our targets in orange. So here we have our targets, and we haven't had to create any LODs in the background, and it just automatically knows that January 2021 is picked up for my correct sales target. Next, on my second tip, sometimes when you're using parameters and dates, you might want to only show the latest 12 months of data or the latest year of data. So for example, instead of having this list of all of my order date months, I just want to show the latest 12 months. So let's go ahead and do that. The first thing I did was I created a month field, right-clicked on my order date, create custom date. And from here, I selected months. That was my first option. From there, what I can do is I can create a secondary calculated field, which is called this year. If the year of order date equals the year of today, then return this value here. End. So this is just going to give us the month of order date for that specific time period. So I'm just going to bring that in as discrete values, so you can see that it's only bringing back my first of every month for 2021. Within my parameter then, what I can do is instead of order dates that I used before, I can now choose this year field, which now only uses my 12 months of this year. Again, I can change this so that I can have format that I want. So we can have Jan 2021. And also the last thing here is maybe you want to automatically default your parameter to being this current month. We can create that by doing a calculation. So we can say current month. And this time we just need to use that date trunk functionality that we did before, month of today. That's going to give us September. And now when we go back into our parameter and I change this current value, I can now choose current month, which automatically defaults to the current month that we're in. Number 3, pizza items. I want to be able to add and remove elements from my pizza, and I want to do that using sets. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a product set. And I'm just going to select a few things to go onto my pizza. I'm going to add them to color. So as you can see, we've got something in our pizza now. We could either use the new feature of set controls, which allows us to go over and add in a filter-like option. I much prefer set actions. And to do that, I'm going to go to worksheet and actions. And in here, I'm going to add 2 set actions. And the reason why I'm going to add 2 set actions is because I want to be able to give the user the option to add and remove values from our set. So the first one, we're going to say add values to set, keep set values on my product. And then we're going to do the same again, but this time with remove items. And same again with the product set, remove values, keep set values. One thing I forgot, we need to make sure it's on the menu option. And this is probably one of the only times that I really use menu. So I click OK, and now I want to add ham to my pizza. So I'm going to click on it, and now I have the option to add ham. I'm going to remove ground beef. So therefore, I can now remove that option as well, giving you your users more intuition to be able to add or remove things from our set. Now, this little trick I actually figured out from Anne's husband, Josh, and this is using a buffer level. Here we have on our map a single point. Whenever you have a single point on a map, it always zooms out. This is my favorite rugby ground, the Halliwell Jones. So all it is in here is, if I show you this calculation, it's just the latitude and longitude of a single point. You'll notice up here that I have my zoom level parameter, and that is just a 1 to 10 with a step size of 1. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a calculation, and we're just going to call this buffer. And we're going to use the function buffer from the Halliwell Jones Stadium, 100 times the zoom level in meters. So I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to use the new map layer feature. So I'm going to drag that in, and now we have our buffer at level 7. We can play around with this a little bit more. We can move it behind our stadium. We can decrease the opacity so it's still there. And now when I zoom in, you'll see that it's getting closer and closer to my stadium, but still having that single point of my map. If you also want to completely get rid of buffer, you can reduce the opacity and remove the line, and therefore it's like it's not even there. My last tip for today is using show hide containers. Now, prior to 2021.2, this was only available for when you used floating. So if I double click on my container and float it, I now have the option to add the show hide container. But with 2021.2, you'll see that option is already available there. So now when I click on that, I'm going to move my button up to the top here. I'm going to press Option or Shift, depending on which version you're on, and I'm going to show or hide it. And what that does is it actually moves the whole container to the left rather than completely moving it away. So you can show and hide. And one of the things that I also like to do with this is in my hierarchy, obviously this can be cleaned up a lot, but this vertical container, I'm going to rename that to be filters. And the reason for that is because now when I hover over my cross, it's then going to say hide filters rather than hide vertical. And I think that just makes a lot more sense for your end users. And over to you.
All right, thanks, Lorna. For my first tip, I want to talk about easy ways to replace data sources and field references. So I have 2 different dashboards connected to 2 different data sources. They're very similar data. So you can see data source A, you can see what my overall sales is. And then you can see data source B. It has slightly less revenue, and it's also called revenue. There's actually some other field name changes in the underlying data as well. Just to make it tricky for you, I've changed the word segment from data source A, which you can see right here, to market segment in data source B. I've changed the order date to date. I've also changed sales to revenue, order ID to order number, and profit to profit amount. So let's say you encounter a situation where you realize you need to switch the data source, and pay particular attention to the color of the map. So if you pop into a worksheet, you can right click on a data source and you can replace the data source. When you do that, you'll get a nice little menu that pops up that will tell you what your current data source is that you want to replace and that replacement. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now this is simple enough, but watch what happens in Tableau world. First, the map changed to pink. It changed to pink because I have the default setting for my sales measure as pink instead of teal between my 2 data sources. But you'll notice that Tableau also got a little bit grumpy. Well, this is really easy to fix with the other idea of replacing references for your individual field. So as an example, my order ID, I have no idea where it is. Tableau can't find it, but I can simply right click and replace the reference and select order number. You'll note when I do that, that my exclamation points are going to start going away. I also have the same thing for sales. So I'm going to go ahead and replace that with revenue. And we have one more, which is profit, which I told you I changed to profit amount. And with that, you've now switched between 2 data sources. You've also fixed any sort of calculated field or field reference issues, and you're all using right click in that scenario. And now I've got my dashboard A, which has my data source, which is now connected to data source B. You'll note that the revenue now matches between those 2. My next tip is how to make beautiful footer filters. So a lot of times when you're interacting with dashboards, it's really useful to explain to your audience what exactly they've clicked on, particularly if they like to do screenshots or share custom views to their friends. So you'll note that I've clicked on the state of California, and at the very bottom, you'll see in hot pink, the state is on California. I can also click on chairs as a subcategory. I'm going to hold down my control key, and I'm also going to click on phones. And you'll see that in that footer, it's going to now show me and enumerate as an array all of those different dimension names. So how do we do this? Well, it's really easy. I like to make a new sheet, and I'm just going to call this my footer. So to make this work, I'm just going to drag on those 3 dimensions that I said I was going to put in the footer. So my market segment, I think it's the category. Let me swap that over to category, the state, and the subcategory. Now you'll notice when you do this, the Tableau is going to bring it out automatically as a square. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to change the mark type to polygon. This leaves me a blank canvas. There's nothing to click about in here. It's just a perfect worksheet that I can start working from. Now I can take advantage of modifying the title, and I can come in here and I can specify each of those various items. So let me go ahead and set category. I will set the category. I'll do the same thing with state, and I'll do the same thing with my subcategory. Let me just jazz them up a little bit by making them hot pink so that you'll be able to see them. And I'm going to go ahead and click apply. By default, Tableau will set it to all if there's all of the dimensions selected. And as soon as filtering starts to take place, it's going to start doing that enumeration and list them all out for you. Then it becomes just a matter of quickly dropping that sheet into your dashboard and then using it. So we'll go ahead and use the one that I already made. As you add and apply your filters across your dashboard, they will automatically show up in your filter footer. For my next tip, I want to talk about something that I didn't know of until very recently, which is using arrays or more than one parameter or value inside of min and max functions. So I'm going to go ahead and make a really quick cross tab. I'm going to bring on my order ID and I'm going to bring on my product information just so we have something laid out quite nicely. Now I'm going to bring on my profit so you can see what I'm going to start working with. I'm going to just drag that onto text. So now I've got the profit for each of my individual products. So my audience doesn't quite understand negative profit. Instead, they would prefer that it would be 0. So I can take advantage of putting more than one value into min and max, in particular 2 values, to make sure that we get a 0 instead of negative profit. So I'm going to go ahead and create a calculated field called profit trunk, and I'm going to evaluate the max between 0 and my profit, which means that if my profit number is more than 0, it's going to show the profit. If it's less than 0, it should show a 0. And I'm going to go ahead and format that for us so we can have it look nice and pretty whenever it comes onto the screen. And now let me go ahead and drag that on. So now you'll see that anytime there's a negative profit, instead of showing a negative number, we're now showing a 0. The same thing can be used and can be quite useful for situations where you might be building histograms. So I'm going to go ahead and bring on quantity to my measure names. And I also have built out a bin for quantity by right-clicking on quantity, creating a bin, and just setting it as 1 in between them. So I've got that right here. So this is just now showing us a histogram of all of the quantity associated with the items. But you can see it kind of trails out to the right. And so this is the part that my users want me to adjust. They really want to truncate this so anything that's 10 plus is in a single bucket. Again, there's many ways to do this, but here's a really slick way using our array functions again. So now I can create the same type of calculation. I'll use the min instead of the max, and we will say either 10 or the quantity, which means Tableau will look for the smaller of the two. So when we have a value like 13, that should instead evaluate to 10. Let me go ahead and drag that on so you get a good look at what that looks like, and we'll see if it's actually functioning. And there you go. We can see that 13 has been transformed to 10. Now, by no means you should leave it this way. So we're going to go ahead and put it inside of our histogram. So let me find my quantity truncated, and let's do the same thing. Let's build a bin. And let's go ahead and set it to 1. And you'll see that the range of it is 1 to 10, which is what we expect. Now let me pop back to my histogram and let me just go ahead and swap this. Now you'll see it only goes to 10. And in addition to this, to kind of sell you on the tip, the last step would be to right click and edit the alias. And now we can put a 10 plus there. Now you've got a nice histogram that doesn't have too long of a right tail. And we've grouped together all of those larger quantity values into that 10 plus bucket. My last tip is how to work with dummy measures. Dummy measures can be really useful when you want to make beautiful text tables or precise looking crosstabs that look like tables but aren't quite tables. So to do this, I like to start with ad hoc calculations. My favorite to use is the min of 1. So I'm just typing min 1 in there. I'm holding down my control key and I'm going to drag this out 3 times. And the value of this is you're going to see that I have a measure axis for each of the different measures that I'm going to take advantage of. Now I'm going to drag on my subcategory so we have more information to work with. And let's just fill out my entire viz. Let's make it entire view. So nothing particularly special right now. I've got 3 bar charts. They're all going to the minimum of 1. So not much value here, but you'll note that for each of these measures, I have an individual marks card. So if I click on this first one, I can bring on the revenue or sales, and I can drag that onto label, and I can change my mark type to text. Now I've got what's starting to look like a text table. For the second one, I'm going to bring on profit ratio. I will drag that onto label, and I'm also going to drag it onto color. It's still a bar chart, but I can go ahead and change it again. Let's make this one a text table as well. So now I've got a text table that has 1 column that has conditional formatting and 1 that doesn't. And now let's get really fancy and let's introduce a pie chart to this equation. So now I'm going to drag on sales. I'm going to change my mark type over to pie. Let's put sales on my angle so that the size of the pie or the size of the slice is related to how much sales. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. And then let me go ahead and drag on segment to color. Now you have a really nice looking text table that has 3 different measures with 3 different styles. And you can use whatever marks are available because you've got individual marks for each column of data. And similarly, there's different levels of detail on each one. So as an example, I've added on segment to the pie chart, which is definitely a different granularity than what we've got, or a different aggregation than what we've got for the total sales for each of the individual subcategories. The next one is also quite new to me. This is a way that you can take advantage of dummy measures in a different way. So first, I'm going to bring on my category. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be building a bar chart. So my audience really would like to know what the sum of sales is, or the amount of sales for each individual region. And they also want to know the total sales. And of course, we could use the total functioning and we could bring on our dimensions for each of those different regions. But my audience is kind of picky. So instead, what I've done is I've created a calculation for each of the different regions. So I've got an east, I've got a south, I've got a central, and I've got a west. I can move around my measure names and measure values. So let me drop measure names to here. So now you can see I've got a text table showing each of my measure names. And let me go ahead and bring on sales as well, because that's kind of our total value. I'm going to move measure names up to my columns. And let's go ahead and make this the entire view. And I'm going to also drop my measure names on color. So this is more what they're looking for, but there's one thing they don't like about this. They don't like that there's no space between these four and the total sales. They would prefer if there was a little bit of space between them to kind of separate them out so that they knew the difference. So what you can do is you can create a dummy measure, and it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to use the min of null, and you'll see what happens. I've got a brand new section here that says min of null. I'm going to go ahead and move that between my West and my sales. And as a final step, I'm just going to alias the name of this. I'm going to edit the alias on this, and I'm going to put a space right there. Now, when your team looks at it, or when your audience looks at it, they've got the measures for each of our individual regions, and they've got the total sales. And if we were getting particular, we could also go ahead and do the same thing and enter the total sales. And that's my 5th tip.
So now we've gone through all of our 5 favorite tips. We're now going to each share 2 of each other's tips. So Heidi, over to you.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite tips that Lorna ever showed, which is kind of putting a dashboard into a tooltip. So I have prepared a number of sheets that I want to use. I have this one band here and another band, and also this dot plot thingy. And I want to have all of that in one tooltip. So what we can do is, if we go to tooltip, I can insert different sheets. And I'm going to start with this one. And in the same row, I will insert the other band that I have prepared. And we can change the width and height of our sheets that we use in here. So I want to make this a lot slimmer, let's say, and also this second one. And now we can see I have these 2 sheets in my tooltip next to one another. But if I want to actually show that these are different, I can insert a divider. And for that, I have created this sheet where I just have black lines in. You see there's not even any kind of data here. And I can insert that in between the 2, just my divider. Let's remove this line break. And we can change the width in here to make it just 9 pixels, and also change the maximum height of this. And we can see now we have this beautiful divider in here. And we can go even further by adding in another divider. So again, let's change the width to 600 and the height to just 9 pixels in here this time. And after line break, I want to insert my last sheet, which I'm gonna make again 600 pixels wide. And now I have all of these sheets in here, so kind of have a dashboard in a tooltip. But we can see, so if you look at the 2 bands at the top, you can see they are the same, and we don't want that. So the left one should be filtered on the country, but the right one should only be filtered on the region. So we can do that by not using all fields as a filter and simply changing this to region. And now you can see I have different numbers in here. So that's my favorite tip that Lorna ever showed. And my favorite one from Anne is, if you have a large data source and you just need parts of it for any kind of reason, you can just go to worksheet, copy this data. So all the data points that we used in this one sheet are now in my clipboard, and I can go to a new sheet and hit Control V. And now I have this new data source that contains just the elements that were in my previous sheet. Back to you, Lorna.
My first one is from Heidi, who talks about some false highlighting. So the way that Heidi has done her false highlighting before is by using a dummy field, which I previously created, which is called deselect. And that's just creating one of those dummy fields like Anne mentioned previously. I'm going to add that to my marks card. Now notice when I click on a bar, what happens is the parameter action is taking place, but everything else is graying out in the background. And we don't want that to happen. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to worksheet and actions. And in here, we're going to add a highlight action instead. But we're going to use selected fields, and we're going to use that deselect. So we're just going to call this false highlight. Now when I click OK and OK again, you'll see now when I click on a particular bar, it now doesn't grey out in the background. But I also do still have the black line around the outside. And maybe I also don't want that option. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new dummy field and just call this select. And this time we're just going to put in the word select instead. And I'm going to also add that to my marks card. And now I'm going to go to worksheet and actions. I'm going to remove that highlight one, and I'm going to add in a filter action. Select my sheet that I'm using, and then I'm going to use the select. This time on selected fields, we're going to select the deselect equals the select, which we know is never going to happen because they're 2 different fields inside one another. So I'm going to click OK and OK again. And now when I click on a different bar, the black bar around it is now not there anymore as well. And also we have just a little bit more visual appeal when we're doing our false highlighting. But that's a great tip from Heidi on the highlight option as well. Now the tip from Anne, we always love Anne's tables, and she's a big fan of cats and emojis. Now what we want to do is we want to create a field which shows whether this particular value is above or below the previous year. So we have our previous year calculation here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a calculation, which I'm just going to call this emoji. And we're going to say if year-over-year percentage is greater than or equal to 0.5, then we're going to find our emojis. So as I'm on Mac, I have an emoji keyboard, and I can choose any particular emoji. So we're going to go with happy cat emoji. And then we're going to say else if year over year greater than or equal to 0. Then we're going to add in the OK emoji, else angry cat end. Now what happens is I can click OK, close down my emoji viewer, and I can add that to my view here. So now I can see that we have some angry cats, some happy cats, and some OKs. If you want the emoji to the left-hand side, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to duplicate our subcategory. But this time I'm just going to add in a plus blank at the end. So that's a different field. So that means I can then unshow my header. And now I have my emojis on the left-hand side with the OK, sad cat, happy cat. Anne, over to you.
Thanks, Lorna. My tip comes from Heidi. She loves table calculations just as much as me. So this is a great way to do nested sorting on your individual bar charts. So in this scenario, I'm trying to sort my regions per category by the sum of sales. So it looks pretty good to start, but you'll notice that Tableau has forced on the left side what those different regions are. And we have a little bit of an issue because South region for technology is definitely more than Central. So we can resolve that using a table calculation. I'm a big fan of index. Heidi may use rank, but they both work the same way. So I'm going to go ahead and type an ad hoc calculation called index. And I'm going to go ahead and make it discrete. Nothing fancy yet. Here's where the magic happens. I'm going to drag region over to color so that you can see we've got all our individual regions. Now, all I need to do is go in and change the way my table calculation is addressed. Right now, we're going table down, but I can specify my dimensions, both the category and the region. I'm going to specify that we need to restart at every category, meaning go 1 to 4 by region and start over when you get to a new category. We're still not quite in order yet, so we need to do one more step, which is to specify the custom sort. So I'm going to go ahead and click custom. I'm going to set this to descending, and I'm going to go ahead and select my revenue. And now you will see we have perfectly sorted bar charts for each of the individual categories showing the different regions. And in particular, there's my South region for technology. It's gone ahead and moved up into the 3rd place spot. My second tip comes from Lorna by way of Corey Jones. This is one tip after I saw it. I use this in my day-to-day job all the time. And that is how you can retain formatting for dimensions or measures or fields in general by using ad hoc calculations. So I've got a simple bar chart here that has the product name and the revenue across them. I'm going to go ahead and drag down my bars so that they're a little bit taller so we can read all those individual names. And I'm going to go ahead and drag this over to the right. I've made this a little bit more custom. So you can see on the formatting, I've got this as a Georgia 16-point font. Just to show you what I'm planning on doing, let me go ahead and bring on manufacturer and let's see what happens when I bring it on. So you'll note that my bar chart resized, and this is in a different font than what I've chosen, which is Georgia. Well, truthfully, in this situation, I really only want the manufacturer and not the product name. So what I can do is I can double click in here and I can just use the ad hoc calculation to tab enter manufacturer. Now you'll note that the size of the bars is the same and it is a custom sizing. You can see that because I've got this clear manual sizing and the font remain the same. So I've saved myself about 3 steps by not having to resize my bar chart, adjust my font, or do anything else other than just replace the field by typing it into the pill. And that's it.
And now it's your turn. Let us know on Twitter which one was your favorite tip, and make sure to use the hashtags data21 and hashtag.
Okay. Let me stop sharing. Okay, so everybody just need to take a breath. Everybody can just like let go of some of that anxiety from watching that.
I feel like I need a happy hour now.
I know, it was so intense. So intense. It was like half of it was like a little bit like a circus sideshow, you know, just to see how fast they could do that. And like learning the tips was sort of secondary to that. But yeah, I think they should build in like a watch this at half speed button for those of us that just don't process information as fast. All right. Well, I thought like right off the bat, that Zoom that Heidi showed was super cool. That's the one that probably sticks out the most to me, at least the ones that I don't already use. Did anybody else want to call out one that they managed to actually understand and process?
That I mentioned it in chat, but that false highlighting tip that Heidi used, and I've seen other people use it too, is really, really helpful. It gets a little bit counterintuitive when you're setting up actions where you're saying, all right, highlight it only if deselect is equivalent to select. So it's kind of a little unintuitive, but worth playing around with. Brian Moore also had done quite a bit of work with getting that false highlighting to be handled in a relatively simple way. So yeah, she lost me a little bit on that one, I'll be honest. And it, you know, I always think that I imagine the clients who are behind the reasons why these tips exist, why someone went to the trouble to figure out how to do that. It was like, no, I want that to not happen when you click on that bar.
And so somebody spent an inordinate amount of time figuring out how to do it. And now we're all the better for it. So yes, we can post the link. The chat probably won't persist after we leave the meeting. So if you guys want links to any of the session that we watched today, we can probably also curate a list of the recommended sessions from the conference in the Tableau user group LinkedIn page. So if you're not a member of the LinkedIn group yet, just go to LinkedIn, type in Twin Cities Tableau user group, it'll pop up. One of us will get a notification that you want to join, because it is like, there's an approval step to it, so we can keep out the riffraff. But do that, and then you'll have access to all that info. We'll put it together. So, all right. Well, it is time. We're right on the nose. So again, I thank you guys for rolling with the punches on the last minute pivot on the Zoom meeting. I'm super impressed. You guys all made it. We'll be meeting again at the end of January, which will probably be another virtual session. We'll keep these sessions virtual during the super cold months here, but we'll probably seek to get back together in person again in March, would be my guess, as long as the earth isn't, ending still. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Cheerful outlook.
Cross your fingers, guys. All right, have a great rest of your day. We'll see you next month, and happy holidays.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, guys.